Welcome to Commander Central, episode 82, a special bonus episode being released on Thursday where we are going to do a deck tech for Patreon supporters Tori and Connor. In specific, Tori's Regna and Krav deck. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
All right, another deck tech on another Thursday. We are tearing these out. And I think the plan is next month to do 3 more of these like this.
Yeah, we have 3 or 4 more people in the queue for sure.
So this is probably going to throw off our schedule of moving to video on episode 100, maybe.
Probably.
Since we're going to jam an extra 10 or 12 episodes in of deck techs here before summer.
Yes.
But that is okay because making content for you guys is what we're all about. Before we get into the deck tech, though, if you yourself wanted to hear us go over one of your decks in this show, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com. And how'd you do that, Max?
By going to patreon.com/CMDR Central.
See, that's what I'm saying. That was a perfect segue for you right there.
No, it wasn't.
Look on your face.
Seamless. That was a seamless transition. No one will notice.
God.
Hey, at least it's not 9 o'clock in the morning anymore.
Exactly.
Nope. Oh, I'm supposed to be saying stuff. I thought Dana did that. Yes, head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and review our reward tiers. And the deck techs start at the $15 range.
Yes, indeed.
Per month.
And if you want to find us on social media and just say hi, you can do that. Chris?
You can find us on Twitter by searching CMDR Central or tagging us at CMDR Central. You can find us on Facebook by searching CMDR Central. Find us on the YouTube searching CMDR Central. And find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
And if you want to find us in person, we play every Tuesday night at D20 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where we've had quite a few people that stop in to play with us.
And I'm going to troll you when you ask, are you the
Chris
Chris from Commander
Chris will
Center?
pretend
Like,
he's
no.
not that pretty nice. I have no idea until you laugh. And then someone's like, that's that guy.
Sorry, Mark, I love you.
You could also find us at a couple of Magic Fests, particularly this summer. And we figured we've been kind of figuring out what our plans are for going to different places to play. And I think we roughly know what our schedule is going to be. May 10th is Magic Fest in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're going to go down for that. I think Chris is going to that one too, I believe, right?
Indeed.
But you're playing, is that Modern?
It is sealed,
It's
and
sealed,
I'm excited for it.
All right. So you're going to be playing that, but I think Max and I are just going to be goofing around and playing side events and looking for games basically all weekend. So we'll be there for that for probably the whole thing. Then at the end of May on the 31st in Kansas City, Missouri, probably all weekend as well. I think Max and I at least. I don't think Chris is going to go to that one.
No.
Isn't Kansas City in Kansas?
There's one there too.
There's one there too. The big Kansas City is the one in Missouri, just to be confusing. So we'll be at the one
I lived in Canada, eh?
So we'll be at the Kansas City, Missouri Magic Fest, probably all weekend again. That's end of May. Then August 10th, Minneapolis, Minnesota Magic Fest, which is close by. We're probably just going to go over there for a Saturday to play. I don't know what. Are you going to go play in a team event for that? That's a ways away, so Chris has no plans there.
I haven't. I have to talk to the team about it.
Okay. Worst case, I'd imagine you probably come over with us if you're not doing something just to hang out for the day and play some games. Then GP Vegas is end of August on the 21st. That's a 4-day GP or 4-day Magic Fest. We'll be going to that one again like we were last year. And then 2 weeks after that in Indianapolis on September 5th, we're planning on going over for that Magic Fest as well. So 5 of them are on the schedule at this point that we're fairly sure at least 2 of us are going to be at, if not all 3.
And that's not even counting any SCG events that may or may not be announced down after their quarter 1 schedule.
Yeah. So we'll take a look at that and try to go to probably a couple of those as well.
Every close modern SCG event.
Playing Modern.
And we'll probably go just to hang out and
play Commander.
Play Commander for sure. So if you are going to any of those, we will hopefully see you there, and we'll definitely have more information as those dates get closer. Now, let's take a look at Tori's Regna and Krav deck. So, Max, you have an RNK deck.
I do have an RNK deck.
And yours is kind of the inverse of this deck.
Mine is pretty much the complete opposite of this deck. So, Tori's husband, Connor, sent us some notes.
Yep.
And it pretty much just said this deck is, got to find the notes because I didn't copy them over. There we go. The deck's main weakness is about protecting itself in the late game. Every card that hits the table is considered to be a threat. So eventually it just turns into an archenemy game.
Okay. Yep.
It's a deck that requires to be fairly substantial board state to succeed. And the typical questions, so upgrade price limit, probably $500 total.
Which is a pretty good budget to work within.
He does work at a card shop, so he can get some fair deals, stuff like that. And then our meta is volatile. Decks range from turn 2 mono green Savala Infinites to thematic and flavorful Nicol Bolas Battle Cruiser builds, so the deck struggles most against the tuned combo decks, but holds its own against the mid-range, more casual end decks.
And I think no matter what we do, you're just going to struggle against turn 2 Savala. That's just what it is. I don't know if you can make an R&K deck that's going to be successful against Savala Brostorm.
Sure you can. It's called Monster Open Can. You just go, oops.
Right, spill it over the table. Yeah, no, I think the
lighter, click.
Right, I think your best bet in that case, if someone's playing Brostorm Savala against your R&K deck, is probably just to go slash their tires after the game. I think that's, I would say, is probably your best bet.
Yeah, I don't understand why people bring decks like that for casual nights like that. There's no point.
Well, and it really, here's who's unfair too. That really sucks if you're a really like hardcore CEDH player who just wants to play against hardcore CEDH decks, and then someone copies a Brostorm deck or a Flash Hulk deck and uses it for beating up on like an R&K deck or someone else's theme deck. And then those people then are mad and they assume all CEDH players play like that, and it creates this feedback loop where everyone gets annoyed. And it's easy to do to assume that that's what CEDH is,
but it's
not. But like, I get why the casual players then get mad, and I get why the CEDH players get mad because they're the ones being accused of being jerks, and it's a mess.
Yep.
So don't do that. Anyway, we will take a look at this deck because I really liked how it kind of is the opposite of Max's, where yours seems really focused on Krav.
Yes.
And this one is definitely feels like it's much more built around Regna being the kind of main win condition.
Yep.
So first things first, we will look a little bit at her mana base, 3.26.
That's pretty low.
That's pretty good for a deck where your commanders are
5 and 6
5
drops.
and 6 respectively. Yeah.
Should we probably read them?
We might as well. Yeah.
So Regna and Krav are partner commanders from Battle Bond. So there's Krav the Unredeemed. He is 4 and a black for a 3/3 demon, and he partners with Regna the Redeemer. And then Krav says, for a single black, sacrifice X creatures, target player draws X cards and gains X life, put X +1/+1 counters on Krav the Unredeemed. And then Regna is 5 and a white for a 4/4 legendary creature angel who has flying, and at the beginning of each end step, if you gained life this turn, create 2 1/1 white warrior creature tokens.
So in your deck, how are you trying to win?
My game plan in my deck is to make a bunch of tokens.
Okay.
And really just build up a substantial token base, get Krav out, and let him eat. Let him get nice and big and swing through with commander damage. I do have a couple dirty scumbag combos in there, like Blood Bond. And I also run the Dictate Grey package as well, just as a worst case scenario type of thing.
Whereas this one is much more about the life gain and maybe just clocking somebody with an Aether Flux Reservoir.
Multiple times.
Yep. Land base. Mana base in general, but lands first. 35 lands.
That's low.
Yeah, it is a little bit low. I will make this point here briefly about lands. It's a tricky thing to get right. You feel it's easy to say, it's too low or too high. You don't want to get flooded. And we mentioned on the Damia show that maybe that's a little bit easier because you're going to draw 7 off Damia, and so maybe you don't care as much because you're not really getting flooded because you're drawing so many cards. So you don't want to have too many because you don't want to get flooded, but also, even if your deck is super, super lean, my Edric deck is like 1.87 average CMC or something. So I can function just fine on like 3 or 4 lands, but I need to get 3 lands out consistently on turn 3 to play Edric, and I need to have the appropriate amount of colors to get out Edric as well. So to get the right density of lands, like even if my deck can maybe get away with only ever having 3 or 4 in play on turn 7 or something, I still need to have 3 or 4 in play on turn 3 or 4.
Right.
And you need to have X amount of lands to hit that density to be able to consistently get that many lands without having to mull down. And of course, mulls aren't free. You lose a card after that second mull too, which makes it less likely to hit your lands. So I feel like in a 2-color deck, 35 is maybe less than I would run.
There are 11 mana racks.
There are. That makes it a lot easier. And only 4 of them come into play tapped, which makes it a lot easier as well. However, of the 35 lands, 2 of them also don't make mana by default. Cabal Coffers, if you drop Cabal Coffers on turn 2 or 3, it's very likely a dead card. Same thing with Serra Sanctum.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 35 lands, but only 33 of them are going to make mana probably on turn in the first 4 turns of the game probably.
This deck also has a lot of mana rocks that are just flat out reducers.
Yes, which also don't do you any good.
Right.
Sometimes.
I mean, I just looked at my deck, and I'm only running 36, but I really focus more on Krav, so I'm drawing more cards consistently.
Do you have a Cabal Coffers in that
I
deck?
do.
Okay. But you don't have a Serra Sanctum.
Nope.
So you have 1 more land and you have 1 less land that's turned off by default.
Correct.
And that's, it's only 2 different, but that can be enough. I feel like I want 36 in this deck.
Yep. And the one that kind of caught my eye, they're in their maybe board, was Caves of Koilos and Fetid Heath, the filter land.
Yes.
I mean, you're running 17 basics.
Yeah.
You could easily cut 2 of those basics for those 2 duels. So at least you drop that Caves on turn 1, you have both your colors.
Yeah.
You're done.
And you don't, the life loss to Caves is just meaningless in this deck. You don't care.
Especially, in this deck, you don't care.
I would replace the 2, there's only 4 ETB tapped lands, but I would get rid of the Guild Gate and the Basilica probably myself. Particularly because Fetid Heath, we mentioned filter lands last deck tech we did. They're cheap. Fetid Heath is, I think, $4.
Yep.
Easy to put in there. And Tainted Field is like $1. And you sometimes run the risk of it only making colorless mana, but it's never tapped. And there's, 12 swamps in this deck and Urborg. It's just always going to be a dual land. Almost always in this deck that Tainted Field is just going to be a dual land.
Right.
So I would probably swap out the 2 Guild Gates for those 2. It's a cheap fix, and you will notice a difference.
Another land that I run that they don't, and this is kind of more of a play style thing probably, is I run a terrain generator in my Regna and Krav list because
you have good
I'm
amount
drawing
of draw.
so many cards off of Krav that, spending 2 mana to just drop an extra land into play is pretty nice. And I'm running 15 basics in my deck.
Yeah. We've kind of hit this beat on the last 2 deck techs we did. Man, I like Ancient Tomb a lot. I think it being $20 makes it really attractive. And this is a deck with 2 fairly expensive commanders. And it's a deck that offsets the life loss as well.
I agree Ancient Tomb would be good in this deck, but I think with all the reduction spells in this deck, I think Ancient Tomb is just going to be a dead card some of the time because...
Sure.
A lot of his stuff is only going to get reduced by 2, and a lot of them only are 2 or 3. So you're spending Ancient Tomb to essentially pay 1 colorless mana and float 1.
Sure, I could see that. I still think it's worth it more than it's not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think in the current build, it might not be as profitable in the late game than the early game.
The last one I would say is land removal lands, and the reason I say that it's important is because you're running Cabal Coffers and you're running Serra Sanctum. So someone else wants those gone if you play them. I think you want their equivalent of those cards gone when they play them.
And it's much easier in this deck because you're running 2 colors.
2 colors, for sure.
Compared to the 3
yep,
colors
you get a little
or
bit
4
of room.
colors. Yep. You can play more colorless sources. And a lot of the cards aren't double color, like double black or triple black or something like that. So,
my only other final one is Legion's Landing, which flips into the land. And the only reason I recommend that is it will make tokens that have lifelink.
Makes tokens you can sacrifice. They have lifelink, which plays into the theme, and it ramps into a land.
Yep.
This is a good deck for it. I agree with that as well. How about the mana rocks portion of this land base?
Oof.
12 mana rocks if you count the reducers. That's really, really good. That's an easy thing to be greedy about because mana rocks aren't fun. And I've seen enough decks where I'm like, oh, why do you have 3 mana rocks in this deck? It's going to take you 9 years to play your commander. To 12 rocks, that's really, really good.
And maybe they run so many because they run into those Sovala Brostorm decks a lot,
you
so they just got to be fast.
For sure.
Where, in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of all the reducers. I do like the 2 medallions in the deck.
I like medallions.
But they're also running Seal the Guild Pact, which is choose 2 colors, spells you cast with those colors cost 1 less for each of those colors. But it's 5 mana.
Yeah, and it only hits each of your commanders respectively. It's not like you have a 2-color commander where you can reduce him by 2.
And when the Immortal Sun's just doing the same exact job, but better.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say that one I don't love, and I don't know if Chromatic Lantern is important in this deck. I like Chromatic Lantern, but I don't know if it...
I play Chromatic Lantern in a 1-color deck.
Do you really?
Yes.
Which one?
It's too good.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's no downside to it.
It's a 3-mana mana rock that creates any color.
I just don't know if the fixing is important, and at that point, if you don't care about the fixing, just run a Felwar Stone for 2.
Chromatic Lantern was a card that I took that goes in and out of my RNK deck.
Okay.
And it really, the times I wish I had it is when I'm stuck on the tainted lands and I don't have a swamp out.
No, I run it in my 2-color Sphinx deck, but a ton of Sphinxes are trip blue.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense.
Or at the very least double blue, and then that can soak up all my counterspell mana too. So I like to have the option to make those planes be available for counterspell mana or be available to cast those Sphinxes that cost 3 blue. But this doesn't have a lot of crazy mana cost, so I feel like a fast rock might be better off here than Chromatic Lantern, but it's not a bad card. How about answers to problems?
Let me pull my notes up because I wrote stuff on that too.
So look at board wipes. I think there's 2 board wipes here: Killing Wave and Merciless Eviction.
Yes.
Killing Wave is one that we might as well read here because it's not one I see too often.
Yeah, I used to actually play this card too.
I was thinking, I've looked at it a bunch of times for decks, and I always feel like it never quite makes the cut, but it's interesting here. Killing Wave is X and a black. For each creature, its controller sacrifices it unless he or she pays X life. So I'm assuming the theory is here you do Killing Wave for 7 or something, and you don't care because you've got a ton of life presumably from this deck, so your stuff just all survives, and everyone else has to sacrifice all but their best creature or pay a bunch of life or just lose everything. However, I feel like, I don't know, if you're putting enough X's into it to make it painful for somebody, you could just cast Plague Wind or Ingruk's Wake. Like if you're making
of Hailfire.
or Torment. But if you're using it for a board wipe, if all your control is a
Right.
board wipe and you're doing it for 7 because you're like, I'm at 130 life and I'm gonna make sure everyone loses their stuff and I'm not gonna lose anything, then you could just Plague Wind much easier, not lose any life.
Yep. I actually pulled this card due to the simple fact is that you used to play Sicarda a lot.
And you can't sacrifice
Yep,
it. Sure.
and this was in my Mogus deck as another cheap, efficient way of removing or forcing you guys to pay life for it, which was what the deck was all about. And then you'd play Sigarda, and I'm like, well, that's a dead card.
Now maybe the thought is you're seeing decks with like infinite token makers, and you're just going to cast it for 1, but that feels too narrow.
So I agree with Chris. I think this should be Torment of Hailfire because Torment, whether you're playing Sigarda or not, you have to either discard a card or lose the life.
Yeah.
Killing Wave, if you have something that makes you not sack creatures, whether you are out of creatures or you're playing Sigarda, the spell just fizzles on that player's end, essentially, where Torment is always going to do something no matter what you're up against.
There's also been enough times when I've cast a board wipe because there's 2 creatures in play, but they're both creatures I need to have gone, and people are just going to pay the life. Unless it's the end of the game where they're at 6 and they can't pay 6. They're just going to be like, oh, you're trying to kill my Elesh Norn and that guy's got a Shield Dread out. They're just going to pay the 7 life.
Right.
Unless this goes with Aetherflux as an additional way of going, oh, hey, I'm going to force you guys to pay this much, and then, oh, I dropped you down enough to go, pew, you're dead.
And this is a creature light deck, so maybe she doesn't have to pay mana that much, but it's not a non-creature deck. There's a few of them in there.
And there's a lot of life gain in this deck where you're going to
token
build up the
makers, too.
tokens. For board wipes, I'm surprised Toxic Deluge isn't in this deck.
Yeah.
You're going to have enough life to where if you don't have Aetherflux Reservoir out for some reason, just blast off Toxic Deluge and clear some board space for you.
I think Deluge does what Killing Wave does, but does it better.
I prefer running the modular board wipes in this kind of deck, so your Cleansing Novas and your Austere Commands and your Merciless Evictions, which I think they're already running that one.
A Merciless Eviction isn't here, but there's no Cleansing Nova and there's no Austere Command.
Yep.
Those are so versatile. I would really be looking at those three that you just mentioned: Toxic Deluge, Austere Command, and Cleansing Nova. I think I would run all three of those over Killing Wave, unless there's some interaction I'm just not seeing. It's a neat card, but I feel like it's just never good enough.
No. I think it's probably just availability type of thing, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, it could be. Because I've got enough of them from Kraken and Innistrad packs that I've never put in decks. And I'm like, ugh, I don't know what to do with it, but I've wanted to run it.
I'm also not a fan of Hero's Downfall in this deck.
Well, I think it's better than, since we're looking at target removal, it's better than Murder. But because of the same CMC and Hero's Downfall also hits Planeswalkers. If I was pulling a targeted removal
Murder's
spell,
gonna catch someone off guard. I really want to play this card in some of my decks too. Just be sitting with like 3 black mana up. They're like, oh, he's not gonna do anything. I'm like, Murder.
Path to Exile is just better than both of those.
Yeah.
Seeing that this deck is more focused on the life gain to build your total up faster, run Vraska's Contempt, because you're gonna exile something and you're gonna gain 3 life.
Sure.
2 life.
2 life. Still, you're gaining life. That's all that matters.
Yeah. I'd go with Path first.
Yep.
And the first one I would replace would be Murder before Hero's Downfall. But Hero's Downfall is 3/2. If you see a lot of Planeswalkers, it might make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Malicious Affliction. Double black and you destroy target non-black creature. But if you have Morbid, you
do it again.
You do it again, and this is a deck where you're doing a lot of sacrifice stuff with tokens and things.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that might not be a bad card for your Regna and Krav deck. You do even more sacrifice stuff.
It says destroy.
It is destroy, not exile. And particularly in white and black, where you have Anguish and Making and Outer End and Path and Swords, you have so many exile options.
And a couple new ones from Ravnica Allegiance.
Yeah. So, yeah, Murder would be the first one. But there's a good mix of things here too. And there's a couple of, you have Return to Dust that hits artifacts and enchantments. Anguish and Making hits anything. Utter End hits anything. The one over in the sorcery column is Revoke Existence, which exiles an artifact or enchantment for 2 mana, but it's at sorcery speed. I don't know. I've just forgotten the name of it now. There's an exile target artifact or enchantment at 3 mana, 2 and a white that was in, I want to say Khan's Tarkir block, and I've forgotten the name now. I would probably run that over.
Wasn't there just the 4 mana one printed in Ravnica?
It had cycling?
No.
Crush Contraband.
Yes.
And there's Crush Contraband in Ravnica that lets you hit an artifact and an enchantment. So I feel like, I don't know, Revoke Existence is in a weird spot. I would rather have an instant speed removal of like Disenchant or something for the same exact cost, or I would rather spend 2 more and have double exile than I would, also at instant speed for Crush Contraband, than I would sorcery speed 2 mana just hit one thing.
I mean, Deicide hits enchantments, and that's
Sure.
1 and a white for an instant.
Yeah.
And you get to look through their deck if it was a god.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the one I would probably take out of here for answers. How about card draw? So you have a little bit, first of all, Krav, it's baked into Krav.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can cheat that a little bit more than she can, because Krav is your main focus. You're casting
Very
Krav
true.
first. I think she's maybe casting Regna first. And Regna doesn't draw you the cards.
No.
So it is there in the command zone, but I think it's a little bit better in yours. However, there's an Alhermit's Archive, which doubles it. But it only doubles it if you're drawing something. So I like Archive, but you need to have an enabler. It just makes your draw better. It doesn't actually draw you cards. Phyrexian Arena.
Should be in here.
And I think, a couple of the small ones like that are going to always get you cards, whether it's Read the Bones or Night's Whisper, or if you're making enough tokens, Mentor the Meek.
Or
they just reprinted that 4 mana one too. That you draw 3, you lose 3.
Yeah. Ambition's Cost and Ancient Craving.
Costly Plunder.
Sacrifice a token, draw 2 cards. So Costly Plunder, or
the new one from Ravnica where
Yep.
you sack 2 things to draw 3.
Not a good card.
That's sorcery speed.
Let's not start this argument again.
I agree. It's not good.
But maybe in this deck where you have 2 tokens, You're just like losing 2 tokens that you don't care about and drawing 3 that might not be terrible. Minions Murmurs.
Yeah.
Particularly the life loss here. Like there's going to be enough times when you have like 5-6 tokens out and you're like, oh, I'm going to lose 6 life and draw 6 cards for 4 mana. That's one I think should be in your Regna and Krav deck, Max.
Yeah,
Or your token, you never have enough tokens. Do you kill your tokens as fast as you make them?
No, I always have enough tokens, but I'd rather just gain the life and draw 6 cards than...
That's true.
Like, seeing that Krav is my focus. If Krav wasn't my focus, I would run it.
You could do both, Minions Murmurs and then sacrifice, because it doesn't sack them. So you just Minions
True.
Murmurs, draw 6 cards for your 6 tokens.
And then draw 6 more.
And then gain the life back off Krav.
That
when you
seems
sack
like a
'em.
waste of mana. But I get it. I appreciate the suggestion.
All the draw, Max.
I'm not you.
I absolutely am I lean hard in the card draw.
There's no lab man in black-white.
There isn't, that's true.
Not
I have
yet.
never ran a lab.
Not yet.
So I think there needs to be a little more card draw there that you can count on reliably putting cards into your hand, even though Krav's great. So how about ways to protect Regna and or Krav? There isn't much here.
There's some Greaves.
Greaves are always good. There's a card I'm going to read, Spiritual Asylum. Creatures and lands you control can't be the target of spells or abilities. When a creature you control attacks, sacrifice Spiritual Asylum, which I didn't like at first. But then I was thinking in terms of kind of Max's deck where you're swinging with Krav more often. And if your plan here is just doming people with Reservoir, then you're probably casting that and just sitting back and not attacking. And so it becomes a non-issue.
And it's a way to protect your important lands.
Yeah, I kind of like it, actually. At first, I was like, that seems like a silly thing to run just to buy 1 or 2 turns. But I like it quite a bit. That's a really cool use of that card. I would still run Teferi's Protection just because I tell everyone to run Teferi's Protection now because it's such a good card. I would still probably run that. But I like Spiritual Asylum a lot. You have Spirit of Safety in this deck that has 18 enchantments, despite not being an enchantment deck. That's going to keep your stuff safe.
Yeah, even if
keep
you have,
safe at the very
even if you
least.
have 3 enchantments out, it's paying right there.
Yep.
And pretty frequently you're going to, because there's quite a few cheap enchantments, stuff like a Johnny's Welcome that gains you life, or Blind Obedience is only 2 and always hurts people. Darksteel Mutation, I guess we didn't mention as a removal spell, but I love Darksteel Mutation, and that's another cheap one. Like very frequently you are just going to put a couple enchantments out that do work, and then drop Sphere of Safety when you have 4 out already. Worst case, Sphere of Safety for 4 mana is half a Propaganda or half a Ghostly Prison because it counts itself. And odds are you have 1 more in play, if not 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
I actually prefer like Righteous War over Spiritual Asylum just because it's protecting both your commanders, protects your tokens. And
Good luck trying to find them. Dana bought them all.
The only thing with Righteous War is your commander isn't black and white.
Right.
So
But
it only protects half. Unlike like if you have a black and white commander where it protects them from both of the spells. In this case, it's only going to save Regna from the Doomblades, and it'll only save Krav from the Swords of Plowshares.
yep.
That's a huge escalation between those 2 cards.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Just a little.
A bit of a power level difference there, I would say. So it isn't really protection necessarily, I guess, but Aura Silence, you mentioned it on our last deck tech. I will say this, Aura of Silence is probably one of the most annoying cards in Commander, I feel like. In a good way. I don't think it's bad. There are very few cards people drop that make me go, ugh, more than an Aura of Silence.
Right.
It's only 3 mana. You can use it to solve any problem when you have to. It taxes everybody else. I only have it in 1 deck right now. It's in my Sigarda deck. But you run it in at least 1 deck, Max. If not 2.
I don't think I do anymore, actually. It used to be in
Did you take it out
Dromoka,
of Dromoka? Okay.
and it used to be in Brago, and it didn't do anything for Brago. And I think there's just better options in blue, green, white now with like Pier's Whim and whatnot.
It just always frustrates me when it comes down. I feel like it always impacts me in some way.
Right. Well, yeah, because you're the opponent.
I guess, yeah, right.
I'm not a fan of Retribution of the Agents in this deck.
Retribution of the Ancients, for those that forgot, is a 1 mana enchantment. Spend a black, 1 black mana enchantment. You can spend a black to remove X +1 counters from among creatures you control, and target creature gets -X until end of turn.
So we probably should have covered this in the targeted removal.
Sure, because I guess it functions that way.
But, I mean, from just looking at the list, assuming Regna's the main showstopper here, getting Krav out, getting enough counters to deal with a problem creature like a Crater Hoof or a pumped something with a bunch of swords on it, it's going to be hard.
I mean, technically, Elenda can get counters from creatures
Yep.
from dying. Technically, Kalidas can. Karlov the Ghost Council gets counters. That's really it. I believe Twilight Drover does. But I feel like you're just not going to want to be counting on those things, being in play, having encounters, and having that be a good use of your mana and time. Like I feel like the amount of times you want to take counters off Elenda is pretty limited. The amount of times that you want to take Twilight Drover counters off and not have them become tokens is pretty limited. So I just feel like it's a cool card in some decks. I've seen it in plenty of times in Marchesa decks where all they care about is one counter for the dethrone trigger, so the stuff bounces back, and who cares about two counters? I'll remove one and kill that 1/1 creature and put another counter on it so it bounces back still. I don't know if this is that deck. There's just not enough stuff that has counters, and I don't love that one either. I like Divine Visitation, though.
So do I.
Turn those spirits into 4/4 angels. I believe that was a homework card Max tested in
my Regna and Krav deck.
How'd you like it?
I love that card. I used to have this weird, like, personal dilemma. Like, I don't want to feed Krav 4/4 angels, but if Krav gets destroyed, I have a bunch of 4/4 angels now.
That's a pretty nice backup plan.
Yeah.
And if you need to feed them to him after you swing and kill one person, you can do that too.
Yep.
Like, right. If you have to, you have to. Anointed Procession is nice. Double those tokens. It's a good way to get a little bit of extra work out of here. You have things like Authority of the Consuls, and we already mentioned Blind Obedience to slow people up, making their stuff come into play tapped. Things that are specific to Regna and Krav that you want to see in this deck. Is there anything that you think is particularly good for these commanders this deck should have? I like Bitter Blossom.
I do too, but I think that's more going the token route versus the gain a bunch of life route.
Sure, because it does hit you for a life, and it does, so that maybe that puts you away. But I feel like the upside.
Oh, for sure.
It gives you tokens to feed to right now. It gives you jump blockers. They're in the air. I just like Bitter Blossom a lot. I like Reassembling Skeleton a lot. But again, I guess maybe that's you counting. That's only a good card if you have Krav out, and if your goal is getting a Regna out and gaining life, maybe you don't need it.
Right. I'm also Venser's Journal is another one that I'm not a big fan of in this deck. It's 5 mana. You have no maximum hand size, and at the beginning of your upkeep, gain 1 life for every card in your hand.
I think you need more card draw in this deck to run Venser. I get Venser's Journal if you are playing a deck if you're me.
Right.
Like if I was playing this and I had like 12 draw spells, which I probably would, and my hand was consistently at 7 cards or 9 cards or something like that, then you're going to gain so much life to put Aetherflux Reservoir into range super consistently. I feel like you need more draw to make it worthwhile.
Yep. I don't like it for a couple reasons. Right now, there's not a lot of draw except for Krav.
Yep.
This is your 3rd maximum hand size card in the deck. They have a Reliquary Tower and a Thought Vessel. Yes, this does a little bit extra, but I would rather just keep it at Thought Vessel and Reliquary Tower. Something like this, in my opinion, needs to be replaced with stuff that's actually going to help your life gain strategy. For 5 mana, you could be playing Archangel Athune.
Yeah.
You're going to get it reduced on the cost by your reducers, and it's going to pump your whole team along with your tokens that you do make off of Regna. And now, another thing, you are running a lot of when a creature enters the battlefield, gain a life cards.
Right.
This might be a good deck for like a Vidalcan Orrery. I'm going to flash in this 1/1 creature to trigger Regna to make 2 more dudes. It might not be ideal, but I think it's going to do more work than Venser's Journal over the course of a game. And it's going to be something people are going to want to remove over Regna or Krav.
At least as the deck stands right now.
Yeah.
This version of that deck, I would tend to agree with that. I've got 2 specific Regna and Krav cards I think this deck might like. The first is Revival Revenge, which was just in the Guilds of Ravnica, Ravnica Allegiance set. It's a split card, and the Revival half is hybrid Orzhov, Hybrid Orzhov, so 2 mana. Return target creature card with CMC 3 mana or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It is straight to the battlefield, so that's not nothing. But the Revenge half is the half I think this deck might like the most. 6 mana, so 4, a white and a black. Double your life total, and target opponent loses half their life rounded up. Assuming that you are at a stage you're gaining enough life, being able to just spend 6 mana and double your life from 50, 60 or something up to over 100, and then give you multiple either Flux Reservoir shots without having to drop into dangerous range, while simultaneously knocking that person who's been hiding behind their pillow fort at 30 or something, knocking them to 15, or if they're gaining life and they're above reservoir range, knocking them down to range where you can pop them, I think would be really useful. So I think that is a card this deck really wants. And the other one that's an enchantment I think it might like is Boon Reflection. That's 4 and a white. If you gain life, you would gain twice as much life instead.
Yep.
So that also plays in with what you're doing and gives you that buffer. Because the problem with Reservoir sometimes, and I've seen this, is somebody domes somebody with it, but then they're at 10. They're at 10 or something, so they're in range for the third person to crack back and kill them. I think things like Boon Reflection and the Revival Revenge put you in a range where you can clock somebody and still be at 40 or 50 life, not have to worry about it.
I do have a couple others here.
Yeah.
I think I'm not a big fan of Pitiless Plunder. I do understand how good it can be when a creature an opponent control dies, make a treasure, I believe is what that reads. It's not just any creature.
When another creature you control dies.
You control dies. Okay. Make a treasure token. I used to run this. It never came out when I could really maximize the value.
And you probably sacrifice a lot more stuff in your deck than this one does.
Right. I think this is great for Campbell Council of the Authorities.
Yeah.
It's going to tax everybody by pinging them for life, and then you're gaining life, which triggers Regna every turn. And then the other one is I'm not a big fan of Twilight Drover. I get it has the +1/+1 counter stuff going on, but it's costing you 6 mana, essentially, to make 2 1/1 Spirits of Flying. I'd rather just play Hanger Backwalker.
Oh, sure.
It comes in with counters, you can add more, and then you're going to get a bunch of little dudes when it dies.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like Hanger Backwalker there, too. And this isn't a deck like Teysa, original Teysa, where the tokens have to be a certain color. You don't care what color the tokens are. They're still getting sacrificed.
Otherwise, stuff like Regal Bloodlord, you gain life, you make a dude, or Crested Sunmare, gain a life, make a dude that's going to be indestructible because of Crested Sunmare.
But you can still sacrifice it if you need to.
Right.
Yeah.
Just more beaters, essentially.
I think I would just cut a lot of the enchantments.
Yeah.
And I would build Black-White Vampires.
Ooh.
Because they all have these lifelink clauses on them, and a lot of them die and create a 1/1 vampire token that has lifelink. Over the past couple sets that have been released, there are a lot of things that create tokens with lifelink. So it's something to look into.
There's also at least one more new Blood Artist / Zulport Cutthroat variant that was just in Ravnica Allegiance that this deck probably wouldn't mind having, although the name escapes me right now, but we got at least one more of those. And there's the Falconwrath Noble, which is the 4-mana version of Blood Artist. And if you're doing Blood Artist stuff, I feel like you want all the things that do those things.
Yep.
Gives you another way to win a game, too.
What are you talking about? They're running Blood Bond. They're going to win every time.
That's true.
All you need is Exquisite Blood and Aetherflux Reservoir, and you just win the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like, shoot you for 50, gain 50. Shoot you for 50, gain 50. Shoot you for 50, gain 50.
Oh, I never thought about that. Thanks, Chris.
Getting your scumbag on, Max.
Yeah, on a Sunday. Ugh.
All right. I like the deck. I like Regna and Krav a lot. They're some of probably my favorite partner pairs. And I really like the fact that it's built to play in a different way than Max's version of the same deck. So I think that is a really awesome thing about that particular partner pair as well. You're getting a totally different version of this same deck. That was fun, and it made it fun to look at, to kind of compare it to yours and see how it's a lot different. Like there's not much card overlap at all.
No, like I wasn't joking. This is the complete opposite of what I'm doing or even tried to do. I tried to balance mine out with equal portions life gain, and tokens, and that just wasn't working. So I just went pure tokens.
And when you kill people, it's because I just hit somebody with a 32-32
Krav.
Krav.
Yep, it's not token swarm. It's feed Krav smashes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that this deck is lacking is it seems like it's split across different areas of what it wants to
It's a
do.
little bit
It wants to
schizophrenic.
protect itself, but then it wants to also be aggressive, and I think you got to choose one or the other.
I tend to agree. But I think it's really close, and I can absolutely see that you turn into arch enemy with this deck because you start getting that kind of life, and you have access to tutors to get that reservoir. You have to deal with it or you're just going to die.
Yeah,
Yep.
maybe that's why it's got such a package of protection is because it turns into arch enemy.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Maybe look at making it such more hyper aggressive where even if it does turn into arch enemy, you are just going to keep continuously, balancing everything right back out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, Connor and Tori, for sharing the deck with us, and thank you very much for supporting us on Patreon. It helps keeps our lights on here. It keeps the podcast. That the stuff all takes money to host it and put it up there and buy this hardware. We appreciate you guys offsetting some of these costs by supporting us online. That is a big deal, and it's going to let us do some pretty cool stuff moving forward for our future shows.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. We will be back next week. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.